Scott, how are you today?
Fabulous as always. I'm an optimist. That's part of being in business, right?
Oh, that's part of being a good journalist, too, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned earlier on the program, Mr. Scott Smith, who I met, 2 weeks ago, I guess. We're talking back and forth.
Right.
And from my conversation, I did send him an email the other day, said that always a pleasure to talk to you and converse with you because you're always full of information. And I find that rewarding that you can talk to people that make sense and can answer questions, and you can have a conversation with intelligently. So some of the subjects we went over with Scott briefly when we had during our conversation. Scott has been a journalist. How many years have you been a journalist, Scott? I saw on your bio you were back to 1993. Do you go beyond 1993?
Yeah, I actually had an off and on journalism career starting in 1974 in different fields, but I really got serious about 20 years ago, and I started writing for Investors Business Daily in 1998. Did that for a few years, went on to other magazines, and then I came back to them in 2008. And that's where I publish most of my stuff now, mostly on business. But I've covered a lot of other fields.
Yeah, I gathered that when I got over your resume. I pulled it up this morning, when you sent me, and it's kind of lengthy, but very interesting.
I'm not your orthodox, boring Wall Street Journal type of business writer. I try to get to the personalities behind business success and what it takes to achieve success.
I gathered that from the people that I went over the list with, and I'm always interested in business, obviously. And the article that I mentioned earlier, I think, before you got on the air, was J.C. Penney that you did that you wrote up on, and I think I sent you some information on that.
Yeah.
As I said, ladies and gentlemen, I met Scott about 2 weeks ago. He did an article in Investors Business Daily. I read it. I called him on a commentary on it or a rebuttal, which we're not going to get into, but and we talked about, he wanted to know my background. My background's rather extensive, and so we've been sort of back and forth with business concepts. And one of the other programs that I went over with Scott earlier, last week or the week before, he had sent me a list of 10 items. What else was on that list, Scott, besides the continuous learning?
Right. And I got to say, Tony, the reality is, whether it's in journalism or plumbing or dentistry or being a CEO, really only about 5% of people in a particular profession really understand the difference between being excellent and being good. And, of course, Jim Collins has written a whole series of books, Good to Great and Built to Last and so forth, about the difference between the number one and number two companies in a field. So I impressed with the fact that you kind of got that and you understood why most startups fail. And so I've been real interested in what you've had to say about continuing education, and I agree that is one of the really big weaknesses for most entrepreneurs. Now, what I focus on in the Investors Business Daily column I contribute to, called Leaders in Success, are the personality traits and the leadership skills which anyone, doesn't matter if you have great talent in a field, but anyone can improve their abilities by doing certain things. One is being curious enough to get continuing education from all sources. Some of the other things that we tend to hit on are learning kind of the secrets to how to be innovative, training, being detail-minded, focusing, persevering, and, there's some others. But these are all areas where you can be good, as Jim Collins would say, and then you can better yourself and become great with some effort.
I have found over the years, even with my own company, when I was the mortgage banker and I had my own school, as I told you, for a number of years, And the people that I was training, because of the loan program that I has a mortgage banker, I didn't want people, I don't want to foreclose on people, families take their home. You know, I was not that kind of a business person. But I was definitely strict in terms of pay your bills and give me my money back. Very simple. That's what you're in business for. But I would find that a lot of the people that came for a loan that was approved, and the system was that they were approved for the loan, but then they had to take the course. And I can't tell you how many people didn't want to take the time to learn about business. And just a very short story that some of those people going back to the 70s and 80s that rejected to come to school, of course they didn't get the loan because they didn't take the course, and I don't want to be chasing people for failures. Those people went on their own and maybe went somewhere else and got a loan, whatever the case was. And I happened to run across them going into business. And on one case, I did go visit the individual. And this is a story of success. I guess it's success in a way. And so I went to see them with a husband and wife. I told the story on the air last week. I think. Husband and wife, they had prominent positions with insurance companies, probably earning about $200,000 a year going back to the 80s, which was a whole lot of money. No debt, no nothing. So they decided they wanted to go into a deli business because their brother-in-law in California had opened up a deli somewhere. So they wanted to go in, and then they told me the story. The loan was approved because they had no debt, obviously. So when they refused to come to the school, I said, well, then you can't get the loan. They were very upset. So they went and bought this deli. And 18 months later, they called me, and they says, can you stop by and help us out? Now, I didn't, went in business until that point, so I stopped by and went to help them out. And, Scott, you would not believe the disaster they were in. They were in a hole for $550,000. This is a true story. $550,000 in 18 months for a deli that they overpaid, didn't know anything about leases or contracts, pricing, marketing. I mean, I can go on forever, but so I said to them, I said, see, this is what happens when you don't take the course. Now, what would happen if I gave you the money without the course? I would be chasing you and take your house. And you don't have enough money because your house isn't worth $550,000. But they went out and bought a business that for $300 and something thousand. This is 1985. It wasn't worth $125,000. So the point I'm making is how education, as you said moments ago, how education and ongoing education is the best there is for businesses. And this couple's a good example. So what they wind up doing, they just closed their doors, walked away, went back to work for the insurance company. And I guess they're still paying off loans and debts. Well, probably not now, but going 85. But could you imagine being in a hole for $550,000 in 1985 from zero debt?
Yeah, and, sad to say, but this is typical of people who get into business. And I'm going to be doing an interview with Damon John of Shark Tank next week. So I've been doing some preparation reading. Yeah, and he says, people get confused two things. You often hear when media interview entrepreneurs, they say, well, you have to have passion for what you want to do. But as Damon John says, that's really poor guidance because, of course, you have passion for whatever it is, whether it's plumbing or lawyering or owning a restaurant. You love to cook and you just assume customers are going to flock to you. He said, what you need passion for, I mean, it's a given that you're going to love that particular specialty, but what you need passion for to succeed is running a business. And very few entrepreneurs understand that. They jump in blindly into the deep end, figuring that they're the best dentist or lawyer in town, and that's going to make them succeed. And the reality is almost all startups fail. It might take a year, it might take 5 or 10 years, but most people going into business are absolutely clueless about what they need to succeed.
Well, let me give you a national statistic, basically, from my research, because I was a I was a educational director for a national company for not a long time, for a short time, but and through that program, we're looking over 53, probably close to 63% failures within 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they might have enough cash to sustain themselves for that period of time, but never earned a profit over and above the first day because they never made money to pay the bills. They kept taking it out of their own account. So if they were putting in $150,000, which is your average small business right now, by the time they got to the 18 months and they had that cash available, they were gone and they never made a profit. And again, it goes back to the education part, but that is a great point, Scott. But you know, beyond the education, under that grouping and category, we throw in cost analysis, marketing, how to read a lease in a contract, how to evaluate yourself. I have a program called self-evaluation. It's a 100-point question, which I used for 45 years. I used it when I was the chief analyst for major banks on businesses. And till this day, that 100-point questionnaire is so right on target, it's unbelievable. And some of the questions there, like you said, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm willing to bet, and I haven't seen the 100-point questions, but from what I know about business, probably 90 of those questions they haven't even thought about, because we're not a very reflective or self-reflective culture. And I did a little study of eHarmony.com, the dating site, and they put you through like a 350 question course before you can join up. And by the time you enter their dating site, it's like going through 10 years of psychotherapy. You really start thinking about things you never thought about before. And I'm sure it's the same with your list is people quite frankly, the smarter you are IQ-wise, the bigger blinders you have to your weakness. And I found this with Microsoft, and I interviewed Bill Gates and stuff, and I asked him, what do you look for in hiring people? Oh, the highest IQs. Well, we all know what happened with Microsoft. And so I would say, a little humility and an openness to learning from others. And for example, your anecdote there about people who didn't think they needed your class, you can never learn too much, and we're not talking about getting an MBA. I just read an interview with all the Shark Tank guys, and they all said, you can get an MBA, it has some usefulness, but it's really not essential in any way. You need a street MBA. You need common sense. You need to learn from people who have been beaten down and survived. In fact, Damon John says he likes to do business with vendors who almost went out of business. They had that near-death business experience, and they woke up and they became open to learning from others and mentoring, all that.
You know why that works, Scott? I'll tell you why it works. It's called Street Smarts. And I just saw the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. And in that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio forms his stock company or his brokerage company. And his rule number one, he didn't hire anybody that had more than a high school education, because he wanted somebody that was hungry, that he can train, that was willing to work 100 hours a week, and had street smarts. He had MBAs working for him. He fired them all because none of them made a dime for him. This is true stuff. He hired all of these non-educated people, truck drivers, plumbers, electricians, whatever, high school diplomas, maybe not even high school. And he put them all to work, and they all became millionaires. And his story is that he felt that they had a bigger drive and a more appetite to learn than the guys coming in from college with an MBA who thinks he knows everything. And I find that dealing with business owners, that they have the same attitude. Well, I got a college degree in business. Well, when I interview those people for whatever, even for a consultation, I ask them 3 or 4 business questions. They can't answer them. They can't answer them. So the thing is, well, you got a degree in business, so how come you can't answer a question? Like, there's a fellow who I've been going back and forth with for months, and I am so getting on this guy. It's unbelievable because he has put out podcasts that he is like the super one in business education. So let me just give you a very short version. The man's never owned a business. And all of his material is taken from someone else's material, and then he digested and recondensed, and he came out with different terms. So I keep asking him questions over the course of several months. I don't get any answers. Then finally he closed his shop up, and now he's reopening again. But he's a typical case of makes the people that know what they're talking about look bad because people don't understand what he is peddling will never get you into a business and be successful, ever. Because their taglines and their subject lines, but they have no explanation. They're theory without substance. Those are my two favorite words.
Yeah, I would concur with you on that. I'll give you a little feedback on that point. One of the reasons I've been successful as a business journalist is I've owned or managed a dozen small businesses, and I spent 14 years in business PR. I represented 85 publicly held companies, and I was always flabbergasted by the stupidity of the Dow Jones reporters who would rewrite our press releases, make major mistakes that could cost our clients millions, and they didn't really understand it because they never had a real job. They got right out of journalism school, started writing about business, and this is a real weakness with a lot of so-called business reporters. They get lots of facts, really fundamental facts wrong. And, you can't, nobody's perfect, but the lack of experience in hands-on business management is a real problem in business coverage today.
Right. One of the I went over your bio. You're absolutely right about this. I don't know how you resolve that. I've been trying to resolve this for years to get people to wake up. I'll give you probably the best example I can give you. We do Blog Talk Radio, which is Internet Radio. Now, I think I told you, and I can tell the audience that after I closed my mortgage company and a few other things, I took some time off, probably 7 or 8 years. I did other things. And so now we just restarted the radio show again. And since October of last year, the shore area, which is I'm in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, which is the shore area, has been sandied out because of the storm. And the business owners here in general have lost probably 35 or 40% of their business and their profits. So what I decided to do probably 2 months ago was to contact as many business owners in the area, 3 Chamber of Commerce. I send them flyers. And what I was willing to do was to give free commercials. That's $500 value. 10 free commercials, a free business newsletter, which is worth $129 monthly, and do a free analysis of their business, my 100-point questionnaire at no cost. The total package on this is $2,129. Now, the Chamber of Commerce send out 350 mailers to their members. I got one call out of 350 members that are losing their butts for profit, cost, evaluation, inventory control. So every time I talk about this, I cringe and I say, where's the stupidity here? I mean, how dumb do you have to be to realize that somebody's saying, I'm going to give you free commercials. I'm willing to take my time to give you a free market analysis to see how to get you out of the hole and where you're lacking profits and sales and marketability, including a free monthly newsletter. It's worth $129 in advice. So it's $2,100 plus. I got one call in 2 months out of 350 mailers, and these are all business owners. How in hell
I'm not surprised by that response. That I've
right.
dealt
How
with,
the hell do you
explain? I've dealt with a staggering variety of businesses, from giant high-tech companies. I interviewed Larry Ellison, down to a tiny specialty company that opens specialty stores on Halloween, called the Halloween Club. And so I've seen it all. I once published a magazine for dentists. And again, really, it comes down to the fact that 5% in any industry or profession are truly dedicated to excellence, and probably 50% of them are hopeless, and the others could go either way. But the fatality rate that you cited shows that, you know, it's a combination of A, getting the knowledge and getting smart about, you know, how to do things successfully and differently, but also implementing the knowledge. You know, if people just, you know, learn something off the web or read a book or whatever, and they don't have a battle plan to really implement the most important points, then obviously it's not going to do them any good, you know, which is why all these management fads never really have much impact. You know, they're hot for a year and then everybody goes back to human nature.
So from your experience, how the heck do you reach these people? Because this is probably the best example I can give you out of offering the free analysis and the free newsletter and free commercials on the air locally. We're local. And one call out of 350 people.
Yeah.
For what?
Well, okay, let me give you some feedback on that. Now, I have been a marketing consultant off and on to small business and big business. I did some consulting, believe it or not, for ExxonMobil and for the U.S. Postal Service and a bunch of tiny little businesses and nonprofits and stuff like that. And, you know, there's no silver bullet, but a couple of things that I would suggest. Number one is I found that most small business owners think that if they take out an ad or they do a program or something, you know, they're looking for the silver bullet solution. And you have to do a fully integrated marketing campaign, just like education has to continue. You have to zig and zag and try different things at different times. A lot of it is kind of chance, so you're, you know, without bugging people and being intrusive, you send out emails and newsletters, which is kind of soft education for marketing. Any business owner should strive to get some articles written about them, because those editorial pieces are good, and then they shouldn't just sit around waiting for the phone calls to come in, but they should use those articles to then market to mailing lists, because mail really actually gets more open than email does, to email, which can definitely help as long as it's, you know, done intelligently and so forth. And you have to kind of use a little bit of everything. It means business owners should join their local chamber of commerce and try to help out, not just their business, because that's what everybody wants to do, but, you know, start networking. Use your current client list to try to leverage. You know, Jay Levinson has written a whole series of books on guerrilla marketing, which I think speaks to the fact that most small companies overlook 90% of the ways that they can market themselves, and you have to do a little bit of everything. Some things work, some things don't. It's frustrating. You have to be in it for the haul, and that's why you better be well capitalized when you jump into the business, because it's Murphy's Law. If anything can possibly go wrong, it will, you know. And I think virtually any entrepreneur that has lasted more than a year will say, you know, if you think becoming an entrepreneur is going to give you independence and it's going to be a cakewalk because you're such a good lawyer or whatever, you know, you don't know much about business, because even without the Sandy storm, you know, business would be struggling, you know, overall.
They struggle anyway, and my experience with these small business owners is that they seem to can't get out of their own way. They're working at the business. You know, they put in there 14 hours a day. They go home, and I'll give you another good example. Okay, I was called into a company that wanted to sell their business. They wanted an evaluation. It was his father's business for 50 years, and he's probably owned it for 20. So they've been around a long time, and it was an engraving company. This is somewhere in New Jersey. I mean, it was I don't want to mention where it was, but it was in New Jersey. Anyway, so I went to see this gentleman. He was a little older now, and he's ready to retire. And so I said, okay, well, or I do evaluation, I need some information on the sales or whatever. And so I said, I want to walk around. I went in the back room, and he had a room that was fairly large, probably 20 by 20, which is a good sized room, maybe a little bigger. And he had all these boxes on the shelf, and dirty, dusty, broken, not broke. And his name was Glenn, and I said, Glenn, I said, what's in the box? He said, well, that's inventory. I said, that's great. I said, how much do you have? He said, I have no idea. I said, what do you mean you have no idea? I said, how long have you been here? He said, well, this was my father's original business. He said, some of that stuff goes back to my father. So I almost fell through the floor without a hole in it, but the thing was that, what the hell is this? So I said to him, I don't get this. Why have you take inventory? He said, well, every time I need something, I go buy it new. So let's say he was doing 10 plaques for the Girl Scouts. He'd go out and buy 10 plaques. Well, it's nuts. So finally, I got him on track. We did the inventory. He had $87,000 in inventory sitting in the back room, and his sales for the year were over $200,000.
Wow.
So he had so figure that out. And that's been sitting there for years and years and years. So I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all this inventory. We're going to put it on sale. We're going to discount it. We're going to do something with it. So we got him off. I got his money. I didn't get $87,000, but I think we ended up with 45, maybe half of that. Got the business sold. But imagine sitting with inventory for 40 years in the back, and every time you want something, you go buy something new. So that's what I mean. People work at the business or in the business, not at it, however term you want to use. But they are really messed up when it comes to what they do. And so one of the programs we have is called Inventory Control Systems, one of my 450. And so when I go into these stores, they say, well, what's tech inventory? They say, never. How could you run a business without never know what your inventory is? So,
Yeah, I spent a lot of years in retail. I started out my business career as a retail manager, and so I had a lot of experience to see the challenges that are faced from accounting, which I knew nothing about, inventory control, hiring the right people, all that kind of stuff. And I'll say this, people think they know more than they do, just like your friends who didn't think they needed your course. So I will say this, any kind of effective education or consulting more than pays its own way. And I know you have some guarantees on your educational programs, and I would say that in my experience that as long as somebody is teachable, if they start getting involved in continuing education and consulting and stuff, the opportunities to move into new areas of revenue and to fix the leaking hole in the budget and all these other things will become apparent to them, and they'll make a lot more money, they'll save a lot more money than whatever they're paying out. And I'd like to go on a small rant here, if I can, Tony, about self-education. Now, as I said, if you go to a seminar or you read a book or whatever and you don't get a battle plan to implement the most important points and keep at it, and not fall victim to human nature, which is to be lazy and forget about stuff. You really have to follow through. But I'd like to mention a few books, if I can, that I found valuable because I didn't get an MBA. I went to college and goofed off for a couple of years, and I learned business on the street. I just happened to fall into a management job as my first real job. So I'd like to mention, if you don't mind, a few books that I found valuable. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's one that nobody's ever heard of. 10 Clowns Don't Make a Circus. It's by Stephen Schragus and Rick Frischman. It says 249 critical management success strategies. So, just for example, they say, study other industries. You know how people think that if they read the trade magazines and talk to other retailers or whatever business they're in, they're going to find out all the secrets. Hey, look at how other industries do things. You're going to learn a lot and bring innovation into your own industry. Also, take care of your health. A lot of business owners run themselves into the ground, And then they wonder, why they don't have the energy to keep working at their business full time. You got to take care of yourself, number one. Read widely. Don't just read trade magazines. If you want to, why they send doctors to get a BA first? They want human beings who can talk to the patients about more than their colonoscopy, who will be good citizens. You need a broader education to connect with the world and be a real human being and understand your kids. Maybe your kids aren't going to be interested in becoming a proctologist, So you want to get outside your little niche and kind of understand yourself and understand the world. And then they get into such basic, obvious things that you would think everybody would do it. They say, for example, tour your own website. I can't tell you how many business sites I've gone to, and within 2 minutes, you can see it's not very user-friendly. You got to wait for a minute for all the fancy graphics to load on, and, it's just absolutely amazing. So the bottom line is, get some good books, and I'll mention a couple of good ones besides that. Brian Tracy's Maximum Achievement, The New Rules of Marketing and PR. Yeah, by New Rules of Marketing PR by David Scott, The Rebel Rules by Chip Conley, Stephen Sample's Contrarian Guide to Leadership, and Seth Godin. Anything by him on marketing is fabulous. And his number one thing, and I've interviewed him a couple of times, his number one thing is, he said, most big companies, their number one mistake in marketing is they don't place it in a strategic advisory position. What they do is they wait until they've got the product manufactured. Then they hand it to the marketers and say, go sell this. Instead of getting them upstream at the innovation point where they can say, look, don't go in this direction because you're going to make this really hard to market. Anything by Seth is so far ahead of its time. If you want to learn about marketing in an unorthodox, cost-effective way, he's one great place to start.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with all these books, obviously, but I'm familiar with Brian Tracy and a few other ones. But it's funny that you mentioned marketing, and we got time here, and I think it's important to mention, not for me personally, but for the listeners, and maybe you could use this up the road somewhere. I had a food company called Crest Foods, and my product was called Cresticello. And I started in my kitchen years and years ago making product, and then I finally put it together. It took me probably 2 years playing around with products, and I bought a building, I bought a plant. It had ammonia refrigeration. I had to get rid of that, put Freon in. Anyways, then I started developing products. I started to develop 8 products, and I went to the airlines because of their breakfast program, and it took me probably a year to get to the main airline people just in New York. Probably a year with samples, presentation, and I couldn't get anywhere with it. So I said, I got to do something here. So I went to Litton Industries, and I got a short degree in microwave energy. I came back to my plant, and I had a big plant with a full kitchen, and that was USDA government inspected. I had a doctor on premises because that's what I wanted to do, and I dealt with the meat business besides. So I went to my kitchen, and I started to play with breakfast programs. And I came up with a package that I was able to give you a hot scrambled egg, home fried potatoes, a hot bread and butter, a roll, bacon, and cold fruit. Put it together, went back to the airlines. They gave me an order for 100,000 packages in less than 2 hours because they couldn't duplicate this anywhere in the country. And that's because I went and got education from Litton Industries about microwave energy. And that was like the beginning of the food business for me. And then from them, I had every airline from Boston to Florida, all the supermarkets, all the convenience stores, and I was delivering just in New York alone, 150,000 breakfasts every morning under contract. So I knew what they had to get. Like I would have a month's contract with how to prepare the food. And I was the only company that was able to give them this product with cold fruit and hot eggs and biscuits and bacon and home fries in the same package, and you couldn't figure out how it happened. So talk about further education. I went and did that, and, I took a business I had from my kitchen and built it to millions and millions of dollars. And the airlines were so happy that they gave me all kind of orders. It was unbelievable. I had their overseas flight for their steak and bearnaise sauce filet mignon. I had Amtrak for burgers. So I've done a lot in that end of it. And believe it or not, I'm self-educated in the food business with manufacturing and production, trial and error. I went to...
Wow. That's awesome.
True story. I went to one of the Army bases. I was selling them my eggs. I used to make 12 variety of eggs in different sizes, two-fold, half-moon, cheese omelet, Spanish omelet, ham and egg, all kind of varieties. And then I was serving the Army base in New Jersey, and I went to the commissary, and they says, "Well, we need a scrambled egg for this size roll, 3 ounces for the commissary." I said, "How am I going to do this?" I couldn't figure it out myself. So I'll go back to the kitchen. It took me 7 months to figure out how to make a scrambled egg to fit a roll. I can't even tell you the process. I went through 1,000 dozen eggs to find the formula that I can make scrambled eggs through a mechanism was through a pump where they used to pump tomato sauce, Italian sauce into 16-ounce and 32-ounce containers for the supermarkets. I used the same system with the pump. And then I had to figure out the liquid process. Anyway, 7 months later, I went down to the commissary, and they said, "Okay, we'll take it." And then I sell it to the airline. So I developed the product for them, and I wind up selling it all over the country. So back to our original conversation is trial and error, perseverance, re-educate yourself, do things that you can get your company off the ground with, and keep working that way. And that's basically what I've done all my life. So,
wow.
Anyway,
well, I gotta say, Tony, you've certainly achieved a lot more in the business world than I ever did. My claim to fame was I wrote a book that was pretty well received called The Everything Public Speaking Book, and I know that speaking in public is apparently more feared than death by most people, and it's a skill that every business owner, I think, really needs to communicate well with potential customers. But that was kind of one thing, and the other was I started out as a kid, and I founded the predecessor to Vegetarian Times, and I sold it to them, and was an editor there for a while. And then eventually I went on to my career of writing about business. And if anybody wants to read some of the articles that I've written about famous people, and they're not all CEOs, some of them are celebrities from different fields, and also I write about people of the past, pretty wide variety. But if you want to see kind of this commonality of the personality traits and leadership skills, just go to investors.com. This is the website for Investors Business Daily, and I contribute to the Leaders in Success column. And if you search my name, Scott S. Smith, you'll get about 300 articles that come up on a whole variety of people, and you can click through. Some of them are blocked, only accessible to subscribers, but you'll get a lot of interesting people that come up, try to get into the articles and see what you can learn from them, because there really are a lot of commonalities in achieving success. You can go back thousands of years to somebody like Cyrus of Persia or Alexander the Great, and you find that those same things like perseverance, resilience, being innovative, thinking out of the box, minded manager, focus, all those kind of things, that turns out to be a collection of traits that are shared by people who are successful in every field. And human beings model other human beings. So the more biographies you can read of successful people, it doesn't matter whether it's George Washington or Ralph Waldo Emerson or any of the other people I've written about, you'll kind of absorb by osmosis those inspirational tales, and it will help you subconsciously at least, and maybe consciously, with some techniques on how to succeed in your own career.
I find it fascinating. I've been doing this education, as I say, except for the short layoff I had when I had a tragedy in my life, and so I took time off and I did something else. I just want to get out of the education business. But I have found all my life, I've been educating people for 60 years. I had my first meet Mark when I was 17 years old, right out of high school. And at 17 years old, I knew how to figure cost analysis. These people in business still don't know how to figure their cost on the product. The first thing they do is raise the price because they're not cutting a profit, instead of trying to go back and evaluate what they're selling or what they're not selling and how to make their product better. And I find it so amazing to me that these business owners just have lost their direction of where they want to go and how to get there. They just, I tell you, I was a counselor, a director for a national company for business education. And I did a seminar for a bunch of accountants. And, of course, I'm out of my league. I'm not an accountant, and I don't talk accounting. There's three things I don't talk on the show. It's insurance, accounting, and legal. I make a disclaimer for what I'm offering because I do that. But I did a seminar for accountants through this organization about cost analysis. And, of course, when I walked in and, they asked me questions and blah, 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 and so I was kind of upset that, they were trying to pick it on me because they said, what's your background? I said, well, it's not accounting. Well, right away, I was a dead duck. But it started out as a dead duck. But then I said to them, and I figured, let me sort of break the ice. I said to these accountants, I said, let me ask you a question. How often do you see your client accept maybe quarterly taxes or the end of the year for final taxes? He said, probably twice a year. I said, so if your client is losing money from January and you didn't see him until June, that means he's lost 6 months of profits. Is that correct? He said, well, basically that's it. Well, basically it's right. 6 months he lost money. Let's face it. So where you go? So I said to him, so when he comes to you and now you sit with him, you say, okay, well, you've been losing money for 6 months. And so the owner's going to say, well, I know, but I don't know what to do. The first thing the accountant says, raise your prices. So I think I had 35 accounts. And I said, so is this typical? And I pointed my finger across the room. I said, is this typical of you guys that you haven't seen a client for 6 months and losing money? First thing you say is raise your prices. 90% says that's what they do. So I said to them, did you guys ever figure out how to do a cost analysis on product, how to do a balance of product or an evaluation of the cost itself, and how to do what I call balance of product mix? You want to know, with all their education, 35 accounts, not one can answer my question. Not one. They had no idea what balance of product was and how to do the cost to get them out of a hole without raising the prices. So, this is the problem with the owner who hasn't learned to take care of his own tools, his own cost.
I'll tell you what I see also as a lesson there, Tony, is a problem with people who are offering services or even really any business that has customers is if you're really going to be successful long term, you have to have more than a sales mentality towards your customer. In other words, if you're only thinking about transactions, I want to get the annual audit done or the semi-annual audit or whatever, if you're only thinking how much can I sell this person rather than how can I be helpful to my customer or potential customer without focusing on how much money can I make on them. In other words, if you treat your customer like a friend and not just a client you could sell something to, what would you tell a friend who was in this kind of situation, which means you got to have more than, 2, 3, 4 customer contacts a year. And that's where customer newsletters, general education, socializing, and these other things can come in because, the best salespeople know that you can sell a lot more if you quit worrying about the sale and you focus on how you can help people. And that is kind of a lesson that I get from your story about the accountants. They're thinking too much about the business and not really the client as a person, from a 360 perspective.
Well, I'll even go one better than that. We have solicitors. I have a fellow work for me in marketing sometimes, and it's been helping me out. Well, we've been working there for a couple of years now. Ever since I decided to come back into the program and restart the education in the school, and I want to open up a school, but the only school in the country that has the availability to teach. And so we probably solicited, I don't know, maybe, let's say 100 counties throughout New Jersey. Letters, phone calls, personal appearance. And I said to them, I says, I gave my background. I had a bio with me, and basically I give them some references, things like that. And I says, well, how would you feel about doing a roundtable for your clients that I would come in at no cost, and we'll talk about some of their business problems that they're having, whether it's profit or whether it's growth or whether it's expansion, and nothing in conflict with what you do. And I would sign a disclaimer that I would not go and talk to these people outside of your knowledge. I didn't want to, set that we're going to go steal their customers, their clients. That was about it. So probably out of 100, maybe 6 months, and this is probably going to fall. Out of 100, we did not get one call from one accounting firm for a roundtable discussion for their client on how to grow their business or how to help their business, or whatever the case was. Free market evaluation, free analysis. And so I finally got a hold of one accountant, and I happened to bump into him someplace. I said, why you never got back to me? He says, I love your program, but I don't want to expose my clients and their personal business to outside sources outside of what we do in the office. I said, that's a hell of an attitude you have, because your client is losing money every damn week, every month. And how many of your clients have gone broke with the economy? So we lost about 20% of our clients. So till this day, in my mind, I cannot figure out the knowledge or the lack of knowledge for these people that do not want to educate their clients, like the accountants or business owners through the Chamber of Commerce, that I offer $2,100 in free value, and they don't call. When I was with the national company, I did counseling for them. People would come in to start a business. I would try to go through numbers with them. And they didn't mention my 100-point program, as you're aware of, because you're familiar with the concept. One of them is, are you going to be an absentee owner, or are you going to work full-time? Do you know probably 80% market as absentee owner and not full-time? So they're going to invest into a business, $140,000 or more average, brick and mortar front basically, and be there less than 20 hours a week. I says, how the hell are you going to survive? So, the mentality is what really drives me nuts. I just can't figure out what their thinking is with free analysis, free marketing. I'm going to spend $150,000. I'm going to put my house on the line, but I'm going to be absentee. My brother's going to run the business. I don't know about costs. I don't know how to read a contract. I don't know what basic financial terms are. One of the courses we teach is financial terms. It's legal terms of financial terms, taught by by proper people in the class, and that is that they can say, okay, well, I'm going to do this or that, or I don't have. I say, you go to the bank and get a loan. The bank says to you about subordinating the loan. Do you know what I'm talking about? Suppose it says to you, we're going to do a 10-year payout with a 5-year balloon. Do you know what that means? Out of 95% people that we've consulted do not know one financial term. I'm not even going into leases and contracts with right of disclosure, contingency agreement, term of a lease, years, triple net lease, gross net lease. They have no knowledge of terminology, so yet they're going into business and depend on everyone else to do their bidding for them. So, what's your opinion on it?
Well, the good news out of that is that for all those entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs that really can listen to what you've said and are willing to do some education, they can be part of that 5% of the winners. They can be the 5% that thinks outside of the box of their industry. I mean, the opportunities are wide open to anybody, with or without a whole lot of money, to be better than most of the people in the field, whether it's being a lawyer or a plumber or a retail store or whatever it happens to be. And you don't have to be brilliant. You don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to commit a gigantic amount of time. You have to be eager to learn and humble, and there's just an absolutely exciting number of ways to improve any business, and hopefully you take some consideration of that before you jump into it. But if you're drowning at this point and you're stuck and you're failing, the good news is you can turn almost any situation around, and it's just a matter of finally doing some things that other people don't do. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing, as you say, that most small business owners especially don't really seize the opportunities, and they're not curious. But there is a way to save any business, and there is a way to make your business more profitable no matter what it is.
My experience over all these years I've been doing this, as I said, we're talking about 23,000 businesses. You're absolutely right. I have found that if someone came to us and said, I'm not making a profit, I haven't made a profit the last 2 months, can you help me? We can almost turn any business around, as long as it's not too late, of course. But you see, they don't realize the problem until they're 6 months in debt. They haven't paid their rent, they haven't paid the vendors, they're on COD. At that point, there's not too much you can do, only because it's late in the day already, So we have a call for you, Scott, okay?
Yeah,
let's
sure.
Bring up Stuart.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Stuart,
Hi.
you're on? Scott, can you hear him?
Yeah, I can hear
Yeah.
Scott?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, you're not good. You're great. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great interview. One of the best I've heard in a long, long time. And Scott, if you were able to inform more people about your thoughts, there'd be fewer business failures and more successes. So I do have a couple of things I'd like to talk to you about. Well, first of all, you keep talking about these 5%. And that's a very low number. How do we increase that as well as reduce the 80% of companies that fail within 5 years? I mean, all the knowledge has been out there already. There are various organizations like the SBDC and SCORE and many other nonprofits that are trying to educate the business person. But somewhere along the line, there's failure among all of us. What can be done to correct that?
Well, I'll jump in with my own point of view, and of course Tony will put in his 2 cents here. But the good news about that is, that percentage of people, pick a number, that do succeed, that can be easily expanded. And it is absolutely true that for a variety of reasons, having to do with human nature and corporate sluggishness and so forth, and just general ignorance, most businesses don't certainly do as well as they could. But it's an easy thing to change in that there are opportunities for, I do think the business world is aware of the fact that all these management courses and fads and books and so forth haven't been really, really very effective. And I'll give you a perfect example. How many of us have horrible customer service experiences with whether it's a credit card company or trying to get service on our computer or whatever, and that company has a slogan on the wall, their mission statement that says, the customer is number one. Of course, they don't mention the fact that they only pay minimum wage to the customer service person you're talking to, who, the contradictions, the inability of top management, especially at the big companies. Now, the good news there is if you're a smaller business, whether you're medium size or whether you're a one-person shop, you can beat big business at its own game by giving much better service. I mean, it is so ridiculously easy to make a better offer. If you go out and you take courses from Tony, or you get an inexpensive consultant to come in and give you an objective view, or read some of the books I've mentioned, some of the better books with common sense, hands-on management ideas. I mean, it is there for the implementing. Anybody can do it, and really, that's the exciting thing, because I'll tell you quite frankly, as I said, 40 years ago, I started coming up through the ranks of retail, and I didn't know anything about business management. I just had to learn it. But my business of reporting on best practices remains exciting to me because I cannot believe all the new things I'm learning all the time from people like Tony, and I'm going to interview Damon John next week and so forth. There are solutions out there. Embrace them before you get into business, or if you're going to stay in your little corporation and try to do better within your department, there's a lot of exciting opportunities out there to improve the overall statistic.
I agree wholeheartedly, but unfortunately people don't. Speaking of Damon John, I've got a little note here talking about his remarks about passion. I'm not totally in agreement with that. I think passion is part of the combination with learning how to run a business. It's a combination that will make you successful. Unfortunately, with our high unemployment rate these days, people are getting into any business in order to make a living. And I'm afraid there's going to be a great deal of failure unless one gets into business without having some passion for what they're doing, because this passion will keep you working day and night, give you the motivation to succeed, and do the hard work that's necessary. So I just want to comment on my view.
Sure, I wouldn't disagree with you. There may be a trend of people jumping into anything that they don't particularly care about, but you do have to have a passion other than the little specialty, whether it's making food or being an artist or whatever. You have to really love the idea of being in business and everything that represents. And I'm afraid most entrepreneurs don't really understand that.
Yes,
I certainly agree with that. The other thing is,
where the bottom line comes in here. Scott,
Tony,
the bottom line is that I have found over all these years that people are just lazy for what they're going into. They'll break their necks to go to banks, try to get a loan, talk their mother to co-sign for their house, but they'll spend all these months and they have no idea where they're going, how they're going to get there. I had a guy come in one day that was a chef for counseling, and he was a chef, and he wanted to open up a restaurant. And so I says, okay, well, you're a chef, but what's your education in business? He has none at all. He says he has a partner who's going to put the money up. I said, okay. So what is the split going to be? He said, I don't know. Okay, where are you going to go? I don't know. How many seats you going to have? He says, maybe 150. Now, being in the food business and owning 165 businesses, I have an idea of where it's going. So I said to this gentleman, I said, well, if you got 165 seats, how big's your restaurant? He said, I think he said 2,000 square feet. I said, that's impossible. Because you need 8 square feet for every table. He looked at me like I had two heads. And he says, how do you know that? And I said, well, I've been around. I've owned restaurants. I've sold and managed. I've done all this. He says, well, I said, you can't get that many, and based on what you're telling me, with your rent and your cost and your kitchen cost, you don't have enough seats to pay the bills. Again, he still looked at me and got two heads. Well, how do you know these numbers? So my point I'm trying to make is not that I'm the genius, but people going into something, they have no idea what the cost is based on the seating in a restaurant. I just did a podcast. I just did a podcast on the retail hotel manufacturing. We're finishing it up. It'll be on YouTube next week. And I talk about the basic, what a retail is, what a wholesale is, what a manufacturer is. Most people don't know the difference between those three and the cost and profit. So these are businesses that make this country go. A retail storefront, brick and mortar, wholesale manufacturing. I break out basically what each one's responsibilities to the other. So when I sit with these business owners and you try to educate them, they think they're so smart, and they're like this restaurant owner or chef. He doesn't know you need 8 square feet for a table. And that 2,000 square feet with 1,000 square feet of kitchen isn't even going to pay the rent. So I'm just trying to make a point here that the education, as we went over earlier, and I did send Scott I did write something for him for whatever value it was, that the ongoing continuous learning is the greatest thing in the world. But I just find business owners to be the dumbest. I was going to write a book years ago called "Why Are Business Owners the Dumbest People in the World?" and somebody told me how to. I should have wrote it because they're really the dumbest people in the world. They'll go out and borrow $140,000, $50,000, but they won't take 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days at a 4-day seminar we have and say, "Wait, I'm going to learn a lot here." So I don't know what you do with that.
Well, that's what I mean. That's the solution. We're talking about the faults, and we need some solutions. But let me go to another subject with Scott, if I may. Mm-hmm. I have been getting the Investors Business Daily since 2010, reading your articles. But I get the trial subscriptions for 10 days, and I love the secrets. I love the secrets of success. And I love reading the articles and Secret of Success. That's why I subscribe. I'm very passionate about those things. Mm-hmm. And my question is, looking at those 10 characteristics of success, and then I'm looking now at a list of why businesses fail. Mm-hmm. For example, they fail under capitalization, lack of business skills and knowledge, lacking cash flow, insufficient sales, lack of a business plan, a marketing plan, and ineffective implementation are some of the major difficulties. And then I look at the 10 characteristics of success, and there seems to be a separation between the two.
That's a very good point. We tend to focus at the Investors Business Daily Leaders in Success column on personality traits and things that you can do to make you more successful. Now, you have to use those traits and use that education and so forth to do specific business plans and practices to implement. So they're kind of looking kind of at the end result, which is, you got to get cash flow and capitalization. We're looking more kind of before you jump into business or, let's say, succeed in any career, whether it's being an actor or being a plumber or whatever, you need to kind of start cultivating an interest in the basic things like being detail-minded. Or all those other things aren't going to mean a whole lot, but it's all part of a process. It's kind of just different points on that spectrum. But that's a very interesting point. Yeah,
it's a combination. Yeah, we're dealing with companies that have fewer than 20 employees for the most part, and I think one of the problems is, and you've mentioned it 3 times, implementation. What do you think prevents these small businesses from implementing some of the ideas? I think some of these people do have the ideas and the knowledge and the skills, but for whatever reason, they cannot implement. If you agree with that, what do you think prevents them from implementing?
I think that it's really very much an individual thing. I mean, the good thing about small business is you do have more control. I think people get bogged down in the details. They need to pick out 3 or 4 things that they can do to improve their business, implement those, and then once they're well along the way with that, pick out some other stuff. If you try to do too much at once, then nothing gets done. And maybe Tony has a thought on that.
I agree totally with you, Scott. But then the business owner, he's doing some accounting, he's receiving, he's doing the inventory, he's putting out fires, and so on and so forth. So what you're saying, in theory, I think is the right thing to do, but they just don't do it because they have to do everything. The mentality of an entrepreneur as well is that nobody else can do it better than they can.
That's part of the problem.
Yes, okay. Well, we know what the problems are. We're looking for some solutions and how to get these solutions to the people who need them.
Like we try to train at the, I'm going back to when I had the mortgage company because I had an actual school, is to train the owner in all terminology, and that includes I had a staff of 137 people. Part of my staff was attorneys, accountants, marketing people, insurance people, because I was self-contained within the whole company. I had 5 corporations under one umbrella. So when we had the course, we had the actual attorney, my attorney, who worked for me full-time in-house, teach the contracts and leases, and then the marketing people, and then the insurance and the accounting. So these people that graduated after the 65 or 100 hours, depends on the course they were taking, they were so smart in the sense they actually knew how to read a balance sheet. They knew what terminology was in legal terms, in terms of leases and contracts. They can go talk to a landlord and negotiate. And then we also had open end where question and answer. So as I said, these were 36-month loans, and therefore they were under my umbrella for 36 months. They can call anytime. They can come. One of the benefits we had, we did a 25-hour continuous education once a year for 25 hours. Again, we had the attorney come in for any new laws, the accounting for any new processes, any new tax code. So these guys were constantly being educated for the 36 months. And this is the same program we're trying to do now and be the best in the country, but it is like fighting these people tooth and nail, and they're just so...
Yeah, well, that's the other thing that goes back to the continuous learning.
Benjamin Franklin was a guy who would take one trait and focus on that famously. Right. And he would try to perfect that, and then he would pick something else out and work on that. The good news is that if you do almost anything to implement things that you read about or you learn at a school like Tony's or online or whatever, you're going to be better than your competitors, because all your competitors are lazy. The average business owner is working too hard and not smart enough, and if you can do anything to get off that rat wheel and do a few things better, it's going to improve your business, and then you can go on to the next thing. So it's not as hopeless as a lot of business owners might think.
I totally agree with you. And that's why if people would listen to the advice that you gave and Tony gave, they would be able to make or save $1 million.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your phoning in.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for joining the discussion and with Tony, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
Okay.
Okay, take care now.
Okay, Stuart, thanks very much. Appreciate the call.
Okay, speak to you later.
Okay, have a good day. Thank you. That was Stuart calling in to talk to Scott. So I think we covered a lot of ground, and I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I mean it very sincerely. That it's been a pleasure talking to you and a pleasure meeting you. And if I can be of any business assistance up the road, just let me know, and I'll be glad to help any way I can.
Well, I'll use you as a source for some of my stories on best business practices, and we'll do this another time, and we'll talk about some of the other topics.
We can do that. That's we're here, and we try to. Each day I get on the air, I try to generate interest with the business owner to say, you don't have to struggle. You don't have to lose your money. You don't have to lose your investment. You don't have to bank take your house. All you have to do is just call here, let me do an analysis for you, and we'll get you on the right track. And then if there's fees later, I'll let you know what they are. But you want to lose your money and your home, and you see, I don't think reality has set in with these people when they realize that they could lose what they have, and where will they go? And I don't think they've given it enough thought. I know that as a mortgage banker and working for those major banks all those years, is that they would say the same thing. They would actually have a psychologist talk to a lender about the failure and what the consequences are. I don't think that exists anymore. I'm sure it doesn't. And so these people think it's never going to happen to them. They're going to, I'll walk away. I won't pay the rent. I don't think they realize the downfall, the downside, not only for the money loss, but what about the effect it has on your family life, your kids, your wife? What happens now? Your wife goes to work. You can't get a job. They got a judgment. You can't get a car. I don't think reality has set in with these business owners. And I think that's why the failure rate is going to continue to be at 63 and maybe go higher. as we go along in society. So,
well, like I say, it's your message is things can be better. So if any owner is listening who wants to change things a little bit, you take a step at a time in the right direction. Things can be improved, and we'll go into some more detail next time I'm on your show.
And we're trying that. We have a podcast going out. We have a new site going up called First Look Business Videos. We'll have the videos on it for the podcast. Actually, I'm going to replay this whole program on the social media. Try to get it up there because you've been very entertaining, very informative, and I really want to thank you again. Scott, you're
okay. Well, anybody you can check my columns out on investors.com, which is the Investors Business Daily site, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Thanks again, and we'll get back to you.
Will do. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. Okay. Wow. We're back on the air, folks. We sort of had a very, very long discussion with Scott Smith. It was very educational. As I said, we ran across each other 2 weeks ago through Business Investors Daily. He wrote an article on Tony Robbins. I disagreed with some of it. I let him know. We've been in touch ever since. And so, as I said, he's very informative, pleasure to talk to. And Stuart called in, had some good points of view. But I think we're on the same page. You business owners, you got to wake up. I don't know how to wake you up. I've been trying to do it for 45 years, except when I had the mortgage company, people came in. I tell you, they come in with deeds and say, I'm willing to learn. But these people today that go into business, to start up or in business, I don't know where your minds are. I really don't. We just talked about stories of failures and success. Don't be a statistic. Don't be losing your property and your house. Spend a few dollars. Get the right information. Let us help you out. You have a free newsletter that you can get off of me. You have a free marketing and advertising here we offer. We're willing to do that for you. But like I say, I can't reach you. You have to call me here. You have to give me a call and say, hey, I heard your program. I'd like to talk to you. We're at 646-478-4796.